The easiest way to define what a brand is a brand is a promise. That is a promise, either explicit or implicit, that you as a company, an organization, or an individual are making to your target audience.
Yeah.
Okay. Initially, when something is off-brand, maybe a layperson doesn't exactly know what that is, but they know that the promise has been broken.
100%.
Right. So if
Like,
you are,
you see a campaign, you're like,
what's something's not right
that's
here.
weird.
Like,
why did they do that?
I don't think I want to give them my money because that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
That sounds fishy to me.
Yep. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Marketing Blender Show. I'm Dacia, and today I'm joined by the amazingly, ridiculously, insanely talented Eric Venegas. Now, he is an adjunct professor at East Texas A&M University. I already mentioned ridiculously talented creative director and entrepreneur and business owner. Off camera, we have already been jamming on sustaining creative and reducing cognitive load. I mean, like how we keep it going. So today we're technically supposed to talk about the difference between brand and visual identity. And I have a hunch, Eric, that we're going to chase some squirrels today, which is like one of my favorite things to do.
Squirrel. Yeah.
Squirrel. Exactly.
There you go.
So I'm super, super excited. To give everybody kind of a context for my introduction, tell us a little bit about your background and, how you got to here. Because I want to jump straight into the deep end, but I think we need to kind of let people meet you first.
Of course. When I think about it, I just got here overnight, but really it's close to a 30-year journey. And it really started when I was younger and passionate about drawing and art. I was always interested in things like comic books and that kind of stuff. But I never knew that there was really a professional avenue for art.
Yeah.
Plus, that love of art, I never wanted to hate it. And everyone I knew hated their jobs. So I just thought, I'm going to pick a career that makes a lot of money. And coming out of high school, I thought, I'm going to be an engineer. So
that's crazy.
Yeah. And then when I got to college, I was not as proficient in the sciences and calculus as I probably needed to be, and immediately changed my major to art.
Yeah.
The school that I went to, Austin College in Sherman, did not have a design program, but I decided I'm going to be an art major. And my parents were fine with that. There weren't those kinds of people who were like, oh, you're going to pursue underwater basket weaving and, we're going to support you for years and years. Growing up as like an Eagle Scout and stuff like that, they always trusted me to make good decisions, and they just knew things would work out. And sure enough, my junior year in college, I got an internship with Fossil, the watch company, to really learn what design was.
Nice.
And then I did that internship that whole summer between my junior and senior year. Then upon graduating, I got a job there full time and really learned design kind of from the ground up. So a lot of my perspectives on design come from practical knowledge and not a theoretical understanding like some, college programs.
Yeah.
And so I did that for a few years until I was ready to make a change. Then went to a boutique studio, Bandowitz and Company in Dallas, and really learned the inside and outs from the owner there, Leon Bandowitz, my creative director, Chris Murphy, Lucinda Simmons, and others, Don Grimes, and really learned everything because they wanted you to be able to do all facets, like get your own print bids and, art direct and design and take calls with clients and, be a part of all of that. And so I really stayed there for a long time, about 13 years, going from junior designer all the way up to creative director. At a certain point, I just needed to change because I needed to grow more.
I call it divine discontent, where
nothing
is like really wrong.
Nothing's really wrong.
You're being pulled or called to something else to get you to the next level, and even if you don't know what that means.
Yes, and I tried to explain that to my boss at the time. Like, he's like, "Why do you want to do this? We got a good thing going on." And I said, "Well, what was your favorite toy growing up?" He's like, "I don't know, Lincoln Logs. Like, where's this going?" And I said, "Well, mine was Legos, and I'll tell you why. Because I like to build things. I like to make things, and at a certain point, I like to tear it down and rebuild it, and that's what I'm doing.
Yeah,
I'm tearing it down, and I'm rebuilding it, but I'm doing it for me. So then I went out on my own. There were a couple of clients who decided to go with me because they just liked what I did.
Yeah, you were their person.
I was their person.
Yeah.
And that was tough too, because like seeing it from the other perspective, business, no matter what people tell you, oh, it's just business. No, business, especially on the small level,
that
it's
is
intensely
not true.
personal.
That is agreed. I
Yeah.
think work is personal.
It's very personal.
I think that's a pervasively dangerous lie.
Yes.
Yeah.
So really at that point, started doing my own thing again for about 5 years, started doing that. Things were going great. And I was like, something else is missing. What else is missing? And at that point, I got a call from Lee Hackett at East Texas A&M. She's the head of the program. And she's like, hey, we've been talking about you. And I was like, who the heck knows? Who knows me? Like, I try to fly under the radar. And she's like, we would like you to teach our branding class. And I was like, okay. I said, first off, I've never taught before. She's like, not a problem. I said, I don't have an MFA.
However, creative director,
Yeah.
not teaching.
Right.
That's not
and
true.
she's and so I'm throwing up all these obstacles, and she's like, what do you have? I was like, well, like 20 plus years of experience doing this. She's like, great.
Yeah.
So I started teaching, and literally after one semester, I was like, I really love this. I'm going to do it the right way. So then I started on a 3-year MFA program there
fun.
in VisCom with a focus on pedagogy, learning to be an educator. And that just opened up a whole other skill set where, once again, like after 5 years, I just got kind of bored, and I was like, I'm doing the same thing. What do I need? Oh, I guess I'm going to do an MFA now. I'm going to teach now. So like,
and I love that you got to be student and teacher.
Yes.
And a parallel path. That's so interesting.
It's so rewarding because you can immediately translate what you're learning directly into the classroom.
Yeah, and then get feedback and like hear where things are going wrong and right, you know, in other people's minds. It's so cool.
So really, from that humble beginning as, a high school student who had really no idea that there was a thing to design, and now being an educator, an entrepreneur, a role model for other maybe designers of color, and just also being a leader for my team as well. Like all those things, I don't really think about it. Like even when I was talking to my mom about this show, she was like, can I just touch you so I can be like, oh, some of that magic is going to rub off? And I was like, it's not magic. It's 30 years of hard work, which I think now, like for me, is just like, it's realized. I'm like, okay, I guess I am kind of a subject matter expert, but
design reps matter. Creative reps matter. I'm on the writing side. I cannot even sign my name legibly, but I am still a creative.
Of course.
And man, the more you do it, it is shocking, like how those reps and that practice, even though you're delivering something professional, takes on a whole life of its own around what do you see and what can you deliver, what can you hear about a brand or something like that.
Absolutely. I try to impart that to my students that how do you get good at something? You just have to do it over and over and over.
Yeah.
There's not a class that you can take for a lot of stuff. You just have to jump in and do the work. I mean, I've always been more on the visual side, but I learned to become a better writer.
Creative director, you have to.
Yeah. So after taking a class with Wayne Geyer, who's a copywriter in Dallas.
Yep, he's so talented.
He's awesome.
Yes.
He's a good friend. And I took his class called Write More Good, which such a good title.
So
and but that really started me on the path to becoming a better writer and a more proficient type of creative thinker and conceptual thinker.
Yeah.
So even now, like when we're starting on creative projects, a lot of times as a team, we're just going to get together and we're just going to bounce words off of one another. We're going to generate lists. We're going to do mind maps. We're going to put things into buckets. We're going to start crafting messaging headlines. And all of that is going to inform what we're going to do as designers instead of just, I just started sketching on this thing. It's like, you're way further along than we need to be.
Totally.
Like we need to start with a concept first because everything starts there.
Exactly. Okay, if any of you just wanted to hit pause and go, wait, what was the process he just wrote down? Don't worry, I'm going to follow up on that. But trust me, because I have some additional questions before we really get into branding and process. you've got this amazing career. And I think it's important for people to understand and hear what's the difference between a creative director, art director, graphic designer, because, you're talking about conceptual thinking and concept, and that's a big difference than just jumping into a sketch, which sometimes is appropriate. So I would love to hear you kind of unpack that career journey and like what each one brings to the table, because I think a lot of people don't realize that arc.
Of course.
And like when each role is so critical.
I think I'm going to answer your question by going in the reverse order.
Love it.
Because as you come into the field, you're really learning how to apply those academic lessons to becoming a professional in designing day in and day out. So as a designer, you're really doing a lot of the work. You're figuring things out. You're choosing typefaces. You're choosing colors. You may be looking at image selection. You might be doing some retouching. You might be working on some headlines and all of these things. You might be creating mock-ups. You might be creating presentations. Like, it's the day-to-day work.
Final deliverable type of work.
Right.
Yeah.
But in order to do that job, you need adequate, direction. And that's that next step up when you become like an art director.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're an art director, you're really responsible for working usually with a team of designers to get them the information they need to literally direct the design. You know what? This is well executed, or this is a great start, but what I would probably do is, move this up, move this over, make this larger, really focus on that, adjust this hierarchy.
Mastery.
It is.
Yeah.
It's refinement, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about any creative project, and I don't think a lot of maybe your listening audience would understand, we are such an on-demand society with everything now. Even clients, they're like, I need this thing. And they're like, here it is. And they see the finished product and they don't understand all the steps that go into it. It's to push a button,
design,
right?
absolutely.
Especially with design. It's a very much a black box.
Yes.
And we don't want to burden clients with that. But someone has to direct that design to, get it to where it needs to be. It's an iterative process where we look at things internally, like we set an internal date long before it's presented to clients to look at it,
Yes.
to refine it, to revise it. And an art director is doing a lot of that work.
Yes.
Right? So then we take another step up the ladder, and you've got, sometimes you have like senior art directors and others, but then you have at the very top, you have the creative director. And you can have creative directors who are over writing or creative directors who are over visual,
Yep.
who may work in a team
Yep.
setting. But generally speaking, that creative director is the one who's meeting with the clients. They're presenting the directive. They're getting input for the clients, translating that for the art directors. The art directors are managing the teams of designers, and that's how that information kind of flows. And then it flows back up, where the creative director will present the final creative to the clients, get that high level type of strategy that they're working on, making sure that we're hitting either deadlines or staying within budget or client service to the nth degree, right? It's like, hey, I need to hop on with this guy, or I need to get a hold of him, or I need to, text them or whatever.
Yeah.
And so all of those roles are critical. Now, when you're in a small agency, things kind of get blurred. So especially when I was just on my own for a number of years, I was all of them, right? I'm designing, I'm art directing, I'm creative directing, I'm client service, I'm paying the bills, I'm doing that. But even now, as a small firm with basically 6 people, including myself, I just hop in wherever I'm needed. I'm like, who's doing that thing? It's like, we're all busy. I said, well, I guess it's me, so I'm going to be production artist, or I'm going to do design, or I'm going to, client service. Like, where do I need to play catch-all to make sure we're doing everything? So, in an agency, there really are those different stratifications, but they all have a different role and they all kind of work together.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's one of those things where a client might say, I just want a brochure. And then everything goes sideways when you deliver. I just need a quick brochure as quickly as possible inside the same color scheme and current branding. And then they hate everything about it. And it's that skipping of those steps, and also the context that a creative director can bring to a client, explaining, here are the trade-offs, here's what we need to do, here's some of the subconscious communication deployments that you're using in this, so that you understand what you are saying to an audience behind the words.
Yeah.
And that translator of what happened in the black box of creative and visual design and visual communication to strategically understood and aligned, with what the business needs to accomplish. It's a big freaking deal.
It is because, and honestly, every rung of the ladder is different. There are some people who are just great designers and that's all they want to do.
Yeah.
It makes life kind of easy if
Yes.
you know that's your niche.
Yes.
You're like, I don't want to get in front of clients. I don't want to art direct and manage other people. I just want to do my thing that I'm good at and play with fonts and types and color. And that's great.
We
That is
have a designer and sometimes an art director who definitely is talented and experienced enough to be a creative director, and he's like,
Nope.
no,
I don't want to do it.
no. And he likes that rapid, fast, artistic expression, and he doesn't want to do that.
He's like,
and there's
yeah,
nothing wrong
no.
with that.
Yeah, no. Mm-mm.
Exactly. He's always like, stop asking. I'm like, fine.
But on the flip side, there are those people who are highly conceptual, but maybe they don't have the skill set to design something. Like they could just sit there and talk about messaging. They know creatively that this is going to work.
Yeah.
They get the strategy, but you ask them to do a thumbnail or design an actual logo and they're like, it's crickets.
Exactly.
So that they're those skill sets. But I think for me, and the reason I wanted to answer that question kind of from the ground up is that's literally my experience. Like it's taking every rung of the ladder and understanding production from the ground level to where I'm at now, which I think makes me a more effective entrepreneur and creative director, because I can tell our team, I'm like, hey, I need that thing yesterday, and I know that's a huge ask, but I'm not pushing you to stay up all night to do those things, because one, that's not how we operate.
No.
And two, I know it takes time. And I always hated it in any environment when someone's like, hey, I need you to shift gears and do this thing. And then I would tell them, okay, great. That's like a half-day project. And then an hour later, like, are you done with that yet? And I'm like, no.
No, that's
and
not how it works.
I'm wasting time talking to you, explaining that it's not done yet. Just let me have a couple of minutes.
Exactly.
And I'll get it done.
Well, it's funny. So, I have such a weird career background in that I started with sales and then was an entrepreneur. And so I, formally got into marketing pretty late in my career. And when I finally got to work with talented creative directors and artists and got to see behind that black curtain of creativity, especially back in the day before everything was digital. And so, remember presenting on like blackboards and pitching, on easels and all this other stuff, or even the loop,
jeweler's
yes,
loop,
exactly,
checking
jeweler's
it out.
loop, and slides. So I was right there when it was transitioning to digital, but I was there beforehand, and I was like, wow. But to start to realize that, how the strategic, because I had such a messaging background, and the business strategy background, and then how it all comes together and that it's not separate.
Right.
And so fast forward to today, it's why I love things like brand archetype, and like those strategic, like decision-making criteria where we start understanding the agreed upon building blocks of a brand even before we start putting visual components. But then you layer in color theory and, and like helping people to understand there are times when we deploy circles and not triangles. And let's talk through what that does psychologically to people and how much it fast forwards connection, understanding, and authenticity, which I know is something, you have a real hot topic on. So let's switch into that. Let's talk about, the difference between brand and that visual identity, and are they the same? Are they not? And let's kind of start untangling that spaghetti together.
So if you have a Venn diagram of kind of like brand and visual identity, they overlap.
Yeah.
Because
they have
brands use visual identity as a tool, but they are mutually exclusive in a couple of different ways, even though in today's kind of business lexicon, like I need a brand, we need to build this brand. It's like, what are we really saying? Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when we get clients who want us to build a brand, what they're really talking about is they need a logo. They need a visual identity. They need, some fonts, they need some colors, they need, probably a piece of collateral, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But they're using that in terms of like, that's my brand. But truly, a brand is much more of an abstract idea. And again, when you're talking about what a brand is, there's a great book, The Branding Gap by Marty Neumeier.
It's great.
Who talks about a brand is not what you say it is, it's what they say it is, like your audience, right? And so what does that mean? So the easiest way to define what a brand is a brand is a promise. That is a promise, either explicit or implicit, that you as a company, an organization, or an individual are making to your target audience.
Yeah.
Okay. And the way you express that is through the visual identity, the design choices that you've made, the color palette, the fonts, the messaging, all of that. And it has to be consistent from every different touch point, whether it's your website, whether it's your social media, whether it is collateral, all those different things.
Signage,
you need to,
your lobby, anything. Absolutely.
Anything you touch needs to feel like it is a part of that brand for it to be a strong brand that resonates with people. And it's only after numerous imprints that everyone's like, oh, I get it. All these things go together.
Yeah.
And
it's who they are.
Right. It's who they are. Right. So initially, when something is off-brand, maybe a layperson doesn't exactly know what that is, but they know that the promise has been broken.
100%.
Right. So if
like,
you
see a campaign, you're like,
something's not right
that's
here.
Weird.
Like,
why did they do that?
Something's a little odd. Like if you have a brand that's really serious and then they go for an execution that's really silly, and you're like, I don't think I want to give them my money because that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
That sounds fishy to me.
Yep.
But there are brands that will just do really off the wall things, and you're like, that just made sense. So one of the things that I know, my wife and I, Katie, we look at billboards. Like, she's not a designer, but she's been with me so long that she kind of reads my mind.
Cannot be married to creative,
no.
Especially not a marketer, without your entire family being schooled in good and bad.
Yes.
Design, good and bad messaging, good and bad advertising.
And it's just funny because Katie will look at things and I'll look at things and we'll talk about it. And I remember we were driving in Dallas. We saw this billboard for, what was it? It was a sandwich shop. I'm trying to remember. John's, what is that?
Jimmy John's.
Jimmy John's.
Okay.
And they were advertising a small sandwich called the Little John for a certain amount of money. And I was like, what would be funny? And Katie said, what? I said, if they got that rapper, Little John, to actually sell the Little John. She's like, no one would do that. Mark my words, within 6 months, they had Little John selling Little Johns. And I was like, hi! I was like, that was fantastic. And I was like, you see, I should have been on that team. I was like, what would be great? And just something, again, a company to take a risk like that, they're not a financial institution. They can have fun with campaigns
100%.
And stuff like that to make that leap. And it's not detrimental to their brand because they can have fun. They can be irreverent. It works for them.
Exactly.
But, you can't do that with Experian or Chase or whatnot. If they have a silly type of execution, you're like, I'm not safe.
Exactly.
Like you're protecting either my hard-earned assets or you're protecting my credit or this needs to be rock solid. I need to have zero qualms about it. And if there are any specific things, I'm like, that's a red flag. That's detrimental to their brand because their brand is built on security.
I mean,
right?
NerdWallet is a great example where, you could think, oh, the word nerd, that could be playful. No, absolutely not. And they deploy it in order to really focus on detailed, thorough, trustworthy, deep dive information. And it's a really great deployment, but they could never be silly.
No.
Even with, a clever name like NerdWallet.
Right.
Instead of something that's more blue blood.
Yeah. And so, most of the time, I think clients, when they say, oh, I need a brand, they're really thinking more of, I need a look. I need an visual identity. Because the brand part, we're willing to help clients with that, but they also have to be able to sustain it. And if they don't sustain it, then it's just going to die on the vine. And you spent a lot of money building this brand, or at least having the toolkit to build a brand and you didn't keep it up on your end. And, you see that with a lot of industries. They may not really subscribe to the idea of brand because they're always trying to follow a trend, right? It's like, oh, hey, we just saw this trend, so we want to do this and we want to do that, and next month it's going to be that thing. It's like you're just following the trend.
Yeah.
It would be better if you just had a rock solid message and you beat that into people's heads, strategically over and over and over, and you stick with that. And it takes time. I think one of the interesting ideas between brand and visual identity was probably one that most of your subscribers can get down with, which is Nike. Yeah. Nike has a visual language, and it's all tied at the very root level with the Nike swoosh. Like, you don't even need the word Nike anymore. You just know.
Yes.
But that, doesn't happen by accident.
And I love Nike as an example, not because everybody uses it, but because if you asked somebody on the street, what colors are Nike's core brand colors? Very few people would know. I don't really know what they were originally, because it is the feel. Mm-hmm. It's what they stand for.
Right.
It's their attitude. If people are like, is Nike and Adidas similar? People, especially the diehards, are like, no. And like, why do we know that? Mm-hmm. Well, it's the same as like, well, I understand you as a person,
Correct.
I can, if you're not in the room, describe you, but I wouldn't just describe you visually. I would describe what it was like to talk to you and whether you're funny or serious or quirky or, systematic or,
Are they dynamic? Are they reserved?
Or reserved? Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not good or bad.
No.
It's who are you?
But that's the brand, right?
Exactly.
That's that promise.
Exactly.
And you and I talked about this a little bit before we were on camera. Maybe one of the best illustrations of on brand is about 10 years ago when you had young people who was like, yeah, that's not my brand, or that's off brand, or
they're I love that phrase.
They're literally
so off brand.
They're like, that's off brand for me.
Yes.
That is perfect usage of that idea, because what they're basically saying is, I would never do that, or that's totally me, or that's on brand for what I want to do, like who I'm trying to tell the world I am.
Yeah.
So they really are saying, like, at the heart, like, that's the promise that they're making to everyone else. And if it's not them, it's not on brand, and that's that broken promise.
Exactly. I'm so curious because I don't know if we're going to agree on this or not. So
no,
it'd be really fun to
Hot
kind of
sports
organize
opinion.
this.
Watch out.
I know, exactly. Okay, so when I think about brand, if we see a startup or a company, let's say within the first 5 years, where they're like, okay, we really need to lock down our brand. Of course, I'm going to be fine using that word because it has a specific meaning. But to your point, it is way more around visual identity. And we're going to do things like, who are your buyer personas? Mm-hmm. What's your market position so that we can understand even visually, like your competitors look like this? How do we visually push out your differentiators? So we're kind of talking a little more blocking and tackling. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because in a situation like that, their culture is not fully formulated, right?
Right.
So they have a business model. They have product market fit by that point, and we're helping to finesse that and saying, how do we elegantly and as accurately as possible tell people who we are quickly using visual identity.
Yep.
But then, we work with a lot of brands that are 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, regardless of their, visual hierarchy and the decisions they've made along the way. Their culture is something.
Yes.
Because they have at this point hired hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, depending on the size of the company, of people. And who they are has been distributed across their stakeholders, investors, partners, employees,
even former employees,
former employees, and all the weird decisions that they made, from what do our voicemails and answering systems sound like, to like how difficult is it to reach a person, to everything.
Yeah.
Every decision that we've made. And so then getting in there and being like, okay, everybody already knows who you are. So now let's realign your visual choices to your brand, because everybody knows how you're perceived except you. So let's start getting real about that.
Let's get self-aware, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I think about it from a CMO perspective. in a kind of a different way. You know what I mean? Like a process. So like I might use the similar tools, but I'm having to come at it from something like, no, I know you aspirationally want to be this, but no, you're not. You know what I mean? Where we are uncovering, like blowing away and dusting off, the layers of sand so that we can uncover who they really are and just tell the truth about it, versus we need to establish something that is true and inarguable, even though you got a long way to go, and to make decisions in alignment with that. But it's the brand will not, I don't know, like fully actualize is maybe what I'm looking for. So how do you approach that? Like, do you use differently, or do you speak differently? Are there tools that you do and don't deploy? How do you think about young company versus mature company?
So currently we're actually working with a company on a large scale rebrand, and they're established. And I can't really talk about who they are because I'm under an NDA.
Yep.
But what I can say is that we did a lot of due diligence initially where we did a brand audit. Yeah. We started with that. So know yourself. Let's look at who you are. Let's look at who's in the competitive space. What can we own?
Yeah.
Who can we really be? I think a lot of times we get stuck with people talking about, well, we need to talk about excellence. We need to talk about this. I get that. But what is it at the end of the day you're really doing differently than your competitors?
Yes.
Can we own that? Even if someone does something similar, how can our take be different than everyone else's? So doing that brand audit gives you a lot of information initially about what we can own, whether it is messaging, whether it is how can we improve on this, or even looking at benchmarks and say, hey, this company over here is much larger than you. You don't play in the same sandbox, but to look like you do, that's what you want, that perception.
Absolutely.
Right? So then with that information, then you can go back, and then on this rebranding project, they were gracious enough to give us a lot of latitude with speaking with their C-suite executives to talk about all the different, functions that go on at this company and understand who they think they are.
Yeah.
And, to your point about, maybe asking about archetypes and stuff like that, we're asking questions that they might be a little weirded out by, like, hey, if this company was an animal, what kind of animal would it be? And they're like, are you serious?
Yeah,
like, what kind of tree am I going to be? And it's like, what kind of tree do you want? Right, exactly. Like, but it's all tied up in trying to understand what archetypes they identify with.
Yeah.
If they say, if the company was a person and they want to say, oh, well, I want to be like this philanthropist. Okay, great. So if we look at who that is and what makes them who they are, well, that applies to this company in this way. Understanding the competitive set, then understanding who you think you are, and then really at that point crafting all the verbal branding at that point.
Yeah.
Let's craft the message. Like, what's our new tagline? What's our new this? What's our new that? And then once you have that toolbox, then it's kind of breaking it out into everything else visual. But I will say that for younger companies, it's a little easier only because they're probably more nimble.
Agreed. And you just have to make some decisions.
Yeah, and there's a lot less history to deal with than stratification as far as leadership goes.
Yeah.
With an established company, what you really need is you need someone who's got some true leverage in the company or skin in the game, who's going to vouch for it. Because as you've probably experienced, when you're working with larger clients, there's a tendency for a lot of these initiatives to be handled by middle management.
Yeah.
And then middle management doesn't want to make a decision because at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, they're out on the street.
Exactly.
Right? And what you need is, a CMO, a COO, or a CEO who's like, I'm not getting fired. So this is what we're going to do. We're doing this.
Yep.
And everyone in middle management's like, great, I'll make it happen.
Exactly.
But you need that leadership buy-in who's going to say from the top up, this is what we're doing.
Completely.
Because if you don't have it, it go nowhere.
We worked with a client a number of years ago where they were about to go through recapitalization. They had already identified the successor to the CEO, so they brought him in ahead of time, several years ahead of time, right? And the company, full leadership team, all of the consultants were in full agreement that it was time for brand evolution or potentially a revolution. And so the, original CEO says, yes, of course, the next CEO, the successor, is going to own this. He's the one driving into the future. We're already doing that. So he full blown was like, nope, I'm not going to participate in this. I don't need to. They have full ownership. He lied. He lied. And I learned so much from that experience. Now, we got them to the other side, but he proceeded to sniper every decision, and we basically had to redo every workshop in a one-to-one antagonistic style with him to get him, back involved in the loop. Because to your point, brand and what you are and how you're perceived and the stewardship of your reputation, it's so personal, and you cannot have a sniper at the C-suite level, and you can't have an owner that does not have full, complete, total, integral ownership and decision making on that component.
Yeah, you really need that buy-in. You need people to not Monday morning quarterback it, because inevitably it will happen. Someone was like, I don't like this. We need to do it this way. It's like, you know what? We actually looked at it that way, and the leadership group settled on this. So we appreciate your input, but this is how we're moving. So even with this large rebrand, we have the COO, who is fantastic. We can get a hold of him. His availability is very good. He works extremely hard. He's a great individual. And he loves what we do. When we get into meetings, he's like, this is the most fun part of my day. It's like, I'm not having to make business decisions. It's like, let's look at pretty pictures. Okay, great. But he's got the buy-in, and he's got the skin in the game, and he's got the ability to really drive that initiative to where we're not like, well, we're just going to sit on this forever. It's like, hey, he wants it now. I was like, let's get it done.
Well, and that alone, marketing cannot drive results if we cannot take something live.
Correct.
Get your approvals in, people. Public service announcement on behalf of all creatives and marketers.
Sign on the dotted line.
Exactly.
Yes.
Let us launch.
That's right. But yeah, I think that's really, going back to your original question, that's really the difference between, a rebranding effort whenever you've got kind of a small kind of startup versus a legacy company. You can use the same tools, but you really need a different kind of take with the strategy to get it done.
Yeah, exactly. And one final thing before we get into maybe some fun rapid fire stuff. I think so many companies, and especially in the B2B space, really under leverage, and they leave opportunity on the table by trying to fast forward through brand or not going through the full brand strategy component. Through our senses, we process 11 million bits of information per second. 90% of that's through our eyeballs.
Yeah.
I think there's another study that says we literally process visuals 60,000 times faster than words. So maybe we need to know what red means to our target audience. Or, again, back to my example earlier, like why we would use circles or not use circles, or, why we're using certain visual hierarchy to speed up subconscious buy-in. Because that's really what we're talking about.
Of course.
Is that brand, I get them, I like them, I trust them, and man, like this is easier to do business with them.
Yeah.
Why would you not deploy that? Like, I like to think of it as an amplifier for everything, because you'll get a lot of CFOs and especially CEOs that come from the financial side where they're like, yeah, what's our ROI of that brand? Okay, well, I'll tell you when you sell your company at a much higher multiple. But in the meantime, it's that, any lead generation, anything that you deploy, if you have an amazing brand, people like that and trust it faster. And you will see higher percentages of success, higher benchmarks, of effective marketing when you've got a strong, consistent brand.
It's true.
Period.
And if you have a strong brand and you have a strong brand guidelines, or a brand toolkit, it makes it a lot easier to deploy new creative if you need to pivot or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we know what our fonts are. We know how we build these things. Here's our image of libraries. I think, again, when we're talking about brand versus visual identity, sometimes you have, some people at the top of the food chain of a company who are like, hey, this should only take like a month. You're like, no.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know where you came up with that. That's just your perspective.
It's insane.
That, again, I'm going to push the easy button, and it's, here's the brand button, and it's built,
Exactly.
So having someone at the top who understands that these things take time, and it is an investment in creating those assets, creating the verbal branding, the visual identity, all these different things help down the line, but you have to invest in it. At a certain point, you have to stop using stock photography.
Yeah.
You got to pony up and say, we're going to do a photo shoot, we're going to do a video shoot. And again, you have to look at that as an investment in assets that you're going to have and use for years down the line, instead of, well, we picked the stock photo, but it's not right. Surely we can just change that in AI, right? And you're like, that's not really how that works. But
not really how that works.
Not really how that works.
Exactly. I mean, obviously we all deploy AI, but to your point, like brand assets, there's something about our brain that knows the difference between real and resonant versus not real. And even while AI is going to continue to get better and better and better, I don't know. I'm gonna bet that our brains will resonate to real. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting.
It'll be interesting. That might be a topic for another day, but I can definitely give you some hot sports opinions on that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, a couple of your favorite brands of all time, whether you worked on them or not.
Oh, favorite brands of all time. Oh my goodness. Wow, you really put me on the spot on that one.
Really hard. You can always come back.
So I think it's kind of funny because some of my students will say, like, what's your favorite logo you've ever done? And I'm so very much like, it's probably the last one I did.
Totally.
Because, but looking, what I always love to look at is there's a website and an Instagram account. This is not sponsored, called Brand New. And they're always showcasing like new branding efforts and rebranding efforts of different companies.
Them. Are you normal? No, I mean, seriously, are you normal for your industry? Where do you and how do you stack up in regards to your marketing and sales compared to your competitors? Now, if you really want clear answers, we can help you get those specific to your industry, but let me give you a couple of tips on how to know how you rate compared to them. Did you know that it takes 7 to 13 touches just to get a marketing qualified lead? And on average in manufacturing, it takes between 5 to 12 points of follow-up in order to close a deal? Is your marketing and sales choreographed to track across all of that? And on top of that, you might be looking at as many as 8 different people on your buying committee. Are you traversing deployments that can really cover and influence that number of humans? You should be able to. Also, do you have a scorecard that organizes revenue by what types of revenue flows into your organization, by how the pipeline works, and then what your lead sources are in order to get those meetings, and then what feeds your lead sources? That's how you drive really effective communication. And last, do you have competitive benchmarks? We do. And if you're interested, we can share them with you. But you can also go hunt those down in pretty simple order. But you do need to know if you're under-invested, because no matter how much you're spending, it's not enough if that's the case.
Looking at a lot of the stuff that, Titans have done over the years, whether it's, work by Paula Scher or others, you just look at that and you're like, wow, that's incredible. Some of the brands that have been built over at Pentagram. And then, there are studios that we look to even in our, in the Metroplex. You're like, wow, I can't believe they did that. Or, like some of the brands that Caliber Creative did with like a lot of the beer and beverage and brands that they've built. You just look at that like, that's gorgeous.
That's so cool.
And stuff like that. So I'm always kind of analyzing, what are my favorite brands maybe on on a national level, on a regional level. But one of my other favorite things actually is with my students when I teach branding, we have a little assignment where students go out and they do an exercise called very bad brands. And so, they're looking for really horrible things and they're like, oh my God, that's horrible. And I think one of the ones that sticks in my head was a company that hauls away trash, and it was called Trash Daddy. And I was like, oh my God, what a terrible name, Trash Daddy. But still, even with that, I looked at it and was like, if they just had some good messaging and they really embraced that.
I know.
Like
lean all the way
this
in.
This is your daddy that left for cigarettes 15 years ago and he's back, Trash Daddy. Like if they just embrace that kind of thing, again, if you are willing to put yourself out there and you can back it up. There was a lawyer here in Fort Worth a couple of years ago, and this might be more like 7 years ago or so, but he was the Texas law hawk, and he just had the crazy commercials, really poking fun at other.
Oh, right now, Top Dog Law.
Yeah, when you see a lot of attorney commercials, they're very much in the same vein where they got to show how tough they are. Well, this guy, the Texas law hawk, was just like, I'm going to make it so silly that it's over the top and I'm smashing things and I've got little people who are like beating me up, just random stuff. And you're like, oh my God. And I remember asking one of my best friends who's an attorney, I was like, can you get this guy? He's like, wait a second. I have a friend that went to law school with that guy. And he's like, he is literally one of the most intelligent lawyers you will ever meet. He can back it up. So for him, this is just a way to get attention.
Exactly. And
like just get in the discussion and make that intro, because really when you are in a crowded market, as anyone who like lives in the DFW area can tell you, it's like every other billboard is attorney,
yes.
Right? If you can just break through and be willing to kind of turn things on its head, you'd be surprised how much of an in that makes with a potential audience, because branding 100%. At the end of the day, when you're making that promise, it's also about being memorable.
Memorability is something very underrated. Like we will say it on the front end of a brand, but then we will scare ourselves out of bold decisions or bold consistency, even if you made a good decision up front. And I love this attorney example, because if he were to do commercials, like, I graduated the top of my law school, I'm this, I'm that, I'm super smart. Guess what? Who cares?
Who cares?
Because guess what? You're a lawyer. You better be smart.
You better be smart.
You better know the law. You better have won some. Those are table stakes. You get no brownie points for being a lawyer.
That's the expectation, right? That's the baseline.
Exactly. But so often we want to talk about ourselves and how we view ourselves or how we want to be viewed versus what serves the market and how do you meet them at the intersection of where are they going to be when they need to remember your name.
That's right.
And how do you make sure that it was resonant enough that they're like, I'm calling that guy.
I'm calling that guy.
Exactly.
That's right.
That's such a great example. I love it. Absolutely. Okay, final thing. You love street art.
I do.
It's same. I'm obsessed. I go to any new city and I just drive around and like take pictures. It's one of my favorite things. So talk about that and like why it speaks to you and what you've learned about it over the years.
I think why it speaks to me is there is a tie there between art and design, which I'll get to in a second. But the underlying thing about it is that it's just so raw and authentic.
Yeah.
Like, street art is just raw and authentic in a way that this is someone who's probably flies under the radar, underseen, underheard. They want to show the world, like, I've been here.
Yeah.
Right? They're literally making their mark on the world.
Yes.
Right? One street lamp, one street sign, one parking garage wall at a time. Okay? And
crocheted fence.
exactly. But that's also an individual who has a creative side that probably is not being recognized either. And this might be their only creative outlet. Yeah. Maybe they're angry and this is their way of doing it. And I try to pride myself on looking at things from multiple perspectives because, from a municipal perspective, graffiti can be a problem because it's defacing property. It brings down property values. There's perception of crime with it. But for a lot of those graffiti artists or writers, that's just a form of expression for them. And the street, the urban landscape is their canvas.
Exactly.
Just like when we were all young, we'd like doing something a little dangerous, It's like, oh, it's a thrill, I'm going to get caught, right? Yeah. That form of expression, I think, is really valuable in understanding that that's also their type of branding. That's their personality. That's their logo that they're showcasing the world. And it's interesting, you brought up like the idea of like readability or legibility or memorability. Like a lot of times with graffiti, it's not easy to read, but it's very memorable. You're like, I've seen that mark all over the city.
Yeah.
I think in terms of like logo design, logos are the same way. You don't necessarily have to read the logo as much as it makes an impact memorably.
Yes.
Right? A good example of that would be the redesign of the Kia logo a couple of years ago, which got a lot of flack. People are like, I can't read it. You're like, but can you remember it?
No.
Like, it's effective in a different way. And I had a student say, like, what's one of your favorite automotive logos? And this came up last night in class. And I said, well, honestly, I love the Kia logo. They're like, oh. And this one young woman was like, well, I drive a Kia, and I like the old logo. And this guy who's her friend is like, yeah, the old logo was so much better. Like, it was so much more memorable. And I said, yeah, nothing says memorable like an oval in 3 letters. And he was like, oh. I said, let's just rethink this. Again, what this student is talking about is the same thing that a lot of individuals talk about, which is, I like it, versus does it work or does it not?
Yes.
But that's kind of, on the other side of my passion for street art. So with street art, maybe not readable, but one thing that I think is interesting, and this came up in my master's research, which was had one of the distinctions of being the longest title for a thesis, which was increasing BIPOC student interest in graphic design through graffiti and street art. And everyone's like, oh my God, it's a mouthful. I'm like, yeah, it is. But that tie-in between graffiti and design is really looking at 90s logos for hip hop artists. If you look at De La Soul or Tupac Shakur or, all these different rap and hip hop artists, they use that as a form of visual expression that ties them authentically to street culture.
Yeah.
And that type of visual identity then becomes their logo of who they are, whether they're East Coast, West Coast,
what they stand for, fight against.
Yeah. So to me, that's why I'm really passionate about a lot of street art. Graffiti is just so accessible too. All you need is a marker or some spray paint or something, and the willingness to go out and invest your time and do it over and over and over and again until you perfect it. So as someone who prides himself on trying to know who I am and be authentic and present myself that way to our clients and our team and others, that graffiti aesthetic just resonates with me because it's raw, it's real, and it's just really fun.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. Okay, if people want to follow you or connect with you, where can they find you?
Sure. So you can find us at smallhatstudio.com. That's small hat, singular, studio, singular.com. You can see all of the work that we've amassed over the last few years. You can see profiles of our team, and then just contact us. I always say, if you want to have a good conversation about design or something else, just hit us up and we'll see where we fit in.
Yeah, love it. And then also the MFA program.
Yeah, so I mentioned it a little bit before, but I got my master's, I guess, it's almost 4 years ago now, at East Texas A&M University. We have a great MFA program that's headed up by Veronica Vaughn. Hey, Veronica. And it is one of the most professional and life-changing experiences of my life. It was 3 years that I dedicated to really making me a better designer, a more proficient entrepreneur, and just having that confidence to say, I know what I'm talking about. So, I highly recommend that anyone who wants to develop professionally or teach on the college or university level, get in touch with Veronica, apply today, and see where it takes you, because we have a great program. A lot of talent that comes out of there.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much, Eric. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this. And really what I want to leave you with is, who you are, all the choices that you make to represent something excellent and important in the world. Don't skip through those, right? Like, allow yourself the patience and the integrity to get rooted in what's true and authentic, so that other people's eyes, that they can work for you, that they can understand you faster. And when that happens, you can bring so much more value, and we can build a business world that has more meaning in it, more connection, more prosperity, less noise. And that's what this is really about. So lean into that brand, ask about it for yourself, for your company, and do the work. It's really fun and it's totally worth it. So Eric, thank you so much. And you guys, onward and upward. So
sweet.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
This was so fun.
That was great.
I love it. Absolutely.
I've never been on camera like this before. I just